Alright guys, this little video is kind of humorous in one aspect at least. I'm not saying that that I'm completely right or that there's no mistakes. I wouldn't say that. But it could possibly enhance your worldview to a degree. And if not, it can be taken as comedy and you can get a laugh out of it. I don't really care. So it's what's happening in our society today can offer some people a certain opportunity, not at the very moment, but very soon, to establish a kingdom. Yes, like actual territory. And the only way that that can happen is that, well, I'll explain that very soon. Um, there has to be a destabilization of the current established system of government, so that people can actually support this new possibility, right? How is that happening? Well, it's already happening, okay? The whole West is being destabilized right now, and although it's being used for another political purpose, which we won't get into right now, that's what's happening. And the most you can do is just, you know, try to tell people whether they believe it or not. You can't convince some people of what's happening right in front of them, especially if you compare that to history all through the known world, right? There's things that repeat itself all the time, and the very least you can do is say, okay, what steps led up to this catastrophe or this horrible mass injustice? Well, there's certain steps that lead there every single time. And guess what? Our society is checking off every single one of those boxes. So, but some people won't listen. And that's happened all through history. There's always been people who will not see it and will not listen. But this video is for those people. It's for those who are actually paying attention to what's going on right now and can have hope for what is going to happen. So I'll try to make that. No, I can't separate this into parts. It wouldn't work necessarily. But okay. So the first thing about a kingdom being established, because that's the topic. I don't know if I told you that or not, but it's how to establish a kingdom in the world today. Okay? So the very first thing you need to do this is you actually need to have the gifts or the skills to do that. If you don't have that, then there's no point. But although like everybody has a gift to rule, and first it's over yourself. It's to be able to govern your own self, your own mind, your own body, your own room, right? Your house, your own property. If you have a family, to govern them well. Like that's where it starts. So if you can't manage these small little things, there's no way that you'll create a functioning society off of flawed principles which you're already enacting in your life. Okay? So the first thing is to get yourself into a good state to be able to make wise decisions. And how do you do that, right? How do you make these wise decisions? Well, you have to know what's true in the world or not. And that topic is very interesting because it also seems to be what's failing in society right now. So people don't actually know how to figure out what's true or not. What are they hearing? What's true or not? Well, that's not really the intention of this talk, this little video right now. But I'll still touch on it in a few ways. It is something called critical thinking, and you use a tool called logic to be able to distinguish, um, to essentially classify and categorize statements and ideas, and to base them off of some type of objective standard that you know to be true, so that you can actually assess whether something is true or not. Okay, that's not the intention of this video. So going back to the original topic, which I sway from a lot, you need to say, for you do have things in order to you're never going to have things perfectly in order because you're human, but you can get to a point where you can actually help other people. And what's going to happen is you need to build the trust of the people first. And the way to do that is to actually know what you're talking about and to be able to deliver. Because that's one of the signs or evidence that someone actually knows what they're talking about, is that they can actually accomplish what they say they will. Okay? How many politicians do that these days? Very little. Okay? Except for one particular one who is hated by those who can't govern very well right now. And I'll leave that nameless, but we all know who it is. Okay? And because that person can deliver. And that's something admirable. Not everybody can do that. A lot of people go into politics to use rhetorical techniques and ways of speaking and gathering the energy of the people to point us towards a common goal that we all must strive towards and stand shoulder to shoulder together on. And it's really nothing, because they just want to get the $250,000 a year pension and salary that comes off of getting into that position, so that they'll essentially be set for life. And well, I mean, you fell for it, right? So let's not be one of those people, okay? Because if you're actually concerned with helping people, if you're actually concerned with guiding and governing these people well, you have to be able to deliver. And you have to know what is actually beneficial for them, their families, and for the society of a whole. Ultimately, avoid the pitfalls that are inevitably possible. There's all kinds of societies throughout history that ceased to exist because they embraced one of these pitfalls. They're like, oh yes, we're free now. Let us do whatever we want. Let us do that. And what happens? They were completely destroyed through all kinds of different ways. And yes, building a civilization next to water that will rise wasn't a very smart decision. Perhaps if these people were paying a bit more attention to the inevitable course of nature, they wouldn't have done that, right? So, or they decide to embrace self-destructive principles in their society that will come back and will destroy that society, cause a disorder that will cause revolt, mass murder, and you don't want that. So in order to do that, you have to embrace the principles and enact them that cause harmony in the society. And ultimately those are what? Well, it just seems that when people follow the Ten Commandments, there just happens to be harmony in the society for some reason. It's very strange, isn't it? It seems the more that we try to remove those, what we would even call natural law, remove that, everything gets worse. And the victims are being added up. So it's weird, right? Isn't that just strange that that would be the case? That one society can embrace one thing and be prosperous, and the other can embrace something contrary and be self-destructive, like, and cause mass suffering. Interesting. Maybe we should think about that for a little bit before we just try to progress our society towards, well, we don't even know, but progress, right? Well, I don't have to go into detail on why that's a stupid ideology. But I mean, I think if you're going to drive a train, you should at least know where you're going or where the tracks lead, right? And a good way to determine that is to look throughout history to, if you're driving this train and you're seeing the same signposts that were throughout history that led to driving this thing off a cliff, you should probably pay attention to that. But some people don't, right? Some people do not have that. They do not care about the long term. They care about the short term, and well, they will get that reward. But what I'm referring to now is society being established. So if you have the support of the people, you're going to have to make a choice. Okay? Do they stay in the current establishment that they're in, or do they allow you to govern them? And that will only, nobody can make that decision for them. However, if you can demonstrate that you are providing a society that is better than the current establishment, people will want to support that. Okay? And that generally would only be the place if the current establishment is going into utter chaos and cannot actually deliver. For example, it would be much easier to start a society or kingdom in a population that's experiencing mass starvation, right, than one that isn't, given that you actually have food. Okay? How the heck do you have food in those situations? Well, stability, knowing what you're doing, and being wise. Because generally nobody can prevent drought or famine, but some people did resist that. And generally it was those societies or mini societies that were self-sufficient and wise and were attuned to the indications in nature of an impending disaster or drought. Okay? Because all of those things are evident that, you know, if a drought is coming, there are ways that people can know that. Okay? The majority of the population would have not a clue, right? But it could be something as simple as seeing a pattern appear in nature always before this drought and being attuned to that happening again. And generally, the people who would see that are those who spend their whole life in those circumstances. And a lot of them we would call to be wise men or hermits in some cultures. So, okay, so you get, say this is your house or wherever you live. Okay, if this whole area, say, is already an established nation or society, if you were trying to start something up, you would be a threat to that society. Okay, if you wanted to, say, get some territory here, this society that's already established will not like that at all. Unless it's in chaos, and that's the only opportunity that can be afforded for something to start up, is a destabilization of this current society or establishment. Okay? That can happen through a number of ways, and yes, we are heading there very soon. So, what do you do next, right? If you're here and say you would like to grow in size at least, you generally need to have either, you know, people give you some land or they allow you to govern their land. And in order to do that, you have to be able to provide for their needs through having the the blueprint for that, right? If you're going to be independent from the society, you need to still provide food. You still need to provide materials, water, shelter. These are basic necessities, but we need more than just basic necessities. Okay, there's also education. There's defense. There's studies, as in education. You need to have education. You need to have places of worship, because if you do not, people will worship other things. They worship themselves and fall even deeper into disorder. Okay? But worshiping something that is objectively the highest being or highest divinity will only bring order, because why? Well, it just makes sense. If this being is the, and that's the conditional statement, of course. If this being is God, well, then you should try to give thanks to that God if they created everything. Okay? So these are all conditional statements. But that is inevitable. People will always worship. That's inevitable. They always have and always will. So when that tries to be taken away, things get pretty bad. Okay? So I'll I'll stop there for this part one. Just to reset the camera, I'll go to part two in a second.